Hi everyone, welcome back to Race to the Top with me, Oki Lazi. In today's episode, we'll be talking to Angela Jain from ITV Studios. We'll be talking about Love Island, saris, and headbutting glass ceilings. After talking to Angela, I was fully enlightened, and I hope you will be too. Let's get into it. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you.
I mean, I'll tell you, that's something incredible if you are the person that commissioned Love Island, the juggernaut that is Love Island.
I'm not sure everyone's happy, but hopefully we've made some people happy.
I'll tell you, you made me and my family happy. We watch it all the time, but it is quite exceptional. Do you think that's the most famous show that you've been involved in?
Well, I've been involved in lots of shows, and obviously I think the thing to remember in television is it is a team sport.
Yeah.
So, whilst I was running the channel and ultimately had the responsibility of signing the check, hundreds of people have made that hit show, literally hundreds of people. I suppose it's probably the one that garners the most attention.
Yes.
Because everyone's heard of it. And even if you haven't watched it, people have got an opinion on it.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm very, very proud of it.
Yeah, no, and so you should be. So it's one of those generational breakout shows that regardless of whether you love it or hate it, you've heard of it. I think, right from the Prime Minister down to someone who's working in the market, it's just the way it is. So, well done to you. So we always start in the same sort of way, talking about you and what it was like for you growing up. Now, what's really cool for everyone listening to the podcast is we're from the same ends, as the young people say, So Tooting, South London. I'm from Balham/Tooting, South London. So very contemporary. So what was it like for you growing up in Rootin' Tooting, South London?
So I grew up in Clapham, Balham.
Yeah.
When Clapham was not what Clapham is now. And my parents had...
and for everyone's benefit, what is Clapham?
So Clapham is a suburb. Is it a suburb? I don't know. It's in southwest London.
Yeah.
It's a huge area because it's got Clapham Junction down one end and 3 tube stations down the other.
Yes.
So it's a massive, massive area. And I suppose it's very South London. I think... so my parents ended up in Clapham. I'm not entirely sure why. And they don't really have a very good reason why either. But they had previously, so they'd come from India, but they'd previously lived in Africa.
So first generation...
They were the first people in their family to move to...
Okay.
Well, actually, first generation to leave India.
Right.
They first went to Africa, to what was called Rhodesia then, but is now called Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe, yeah.
And then they came to the UK. My dad came first, and about 18 months later, my mum joined. And I've got 3 older sisters, and they ended up... Actually, my dad started by living in a room with lots and lots of other immigrant men in Tooting.
All right.
But he aspired to live in Clapham, and so that's where they eventually ended up. So we ended up in Clapham. So I was born in Clapham, went to school there. It was a very, very white neighbourhood. It was quite isolating and confusing because in my primary school, I was the only person of colour.
Yeah.
So that was really quite odd.
Was it odd to you at the time? Because, sometimes kids don't see anything, especially when you're young. Is it something you...
No, I saw it, but I couldn't give it a name, and
Right.
neither could my parents. It was a reflection of the area that we were in.
Yeah.
So actually, it was odd and not odd. It was odd for me because in my home life, my parents' friends were all Indian.
Mm-hmm.
So I lived 2 different lives. And then when I went to school, my school was all white.
Yeah. Do you think that's actually an advantage? It's like a superpower, really, because you can move in both worlds easily?
It became a superpower when I acknowledged how important and relevant it was. At the time, it was really confusing.
Yeah.
I didn't know who I was. I was one person at school and outside of the home, and I was another person at home. I think lots of particularly Indian immigrants, children of Indian immigrants, can really relate to that.
I think
because
so.
I think, and actually some West African cultures, some other African cultures, particularly when you have quite a strict and traditional background at home,
Yeah.
but outside represents freedom.
Yes.
So and my mum was a primary school teacher. She didn't start out being that, but she was actually unusual in her family. She's got many sisters too, and I'm one of 4 girls, and she was the only woman in her family that worked.
All right.
So
Okay.
I think she and my dad were probably feminists before I even knew what feminism meant. So she was always working. She had children, had a family.
What drove her to work? I mean, because it wasn't the accepted thing at the
Yeah,
time.
I mean, unfortunately, she's no longer with us, so I can't ask her that
No.
question. I think fiercely bright and independent woman who wanted to do things her way.
Hmm.
So I'm not sure what drove her to do that, but she was very independent. Um, so she was a primary school teacher, and I think what marked me out more than the colour of my skin was because she was a primary school teacher, all of us could read and write before we went to school.
Right. Oh, wow.
So I immediately went to school, and I was one of the younger children and was marked out as the kid that could read and write already. And I remember that really making me not feel great because all I wanted to do was fit in.
Yes.
So I couldn't really recognise or understand that the colour of my skin might be an issue. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. What really became an issue was that I could read and write.
I
So
was,
then they put me in the next class immediately, a year above,
all right.
and that was even more confusing and isolating. Anyway, in the end, I was quite severely bullied, and I don't think we would have recognised what that was then, and my parents certainly didn't. And I changed schools so that I could go to the school that my mum taught at.
All right.
And then it became a much happier and more peaceful existence. And it was an amazing primary school, and that was sort of my formative younger years, really.
It's amazing that I think what you're saying is, as a young child, you'd be more bullied by being either a year out of step and being able to read or write than for the colour of your skin.
It
You
felt
know.
like that to me, if I'm being
Yeah.
really honest. It really did. And so I remember thinking, and I did it throughout my school life, I would really underplay my intelligence because I think from early on, I realised, and it's different now, we have to really recognise it's different
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Then I don't think it was that cool to be bright. So I really underplayed it all. And I've got 3 extremely bright sisters. So I was never seen as the bright one in the family. I was always seen as the not bright one in the family, and always a bit of a letdown. And I think I definitely underplayed it because it didn't feel good
Yeah.
to be clever.
Yeah. Or easier just to fit in.
Exactly. And
And
so
not
I
stand
think
out.
I think it's also because context is everything, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it's also really important to understand I was growing up in the 70s where it was all about assimilation. It wasn't cool like it is for my kids to say I'm a quarter this and I'm a 15th that, I'm a 14th that. For me, it was my name to start with was anglicised.
Right.
So Angela is not the name I was given. That was anglicised very quickly. So actually, it was all about assimilation and fitting in. And so, therefore, anything that marked you out as different was just another thing that people could throw at you.
Yeah. No, I remember back then as well. You kind of it. We'll talk about being authentic self, but then it was hard because you just want to fit in. And fitting in is so important when you're young. It's like that's why you get them all looking the same clothes and the same haircut. Now you see guys the same because it's just fitting in.
Yeah.
It's just so
Yeah.
important to fit in. But when you have a different skin color, and if you had a different, that becomes so much more difficult.
Yes, definitely. And I think it definitely with age and with hindsight, you recognise it for what it is. I think maybe helpfully, I didn't, and neither did my parents, give it a label that I think I would probably now give it.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair enough. So when you went to the school with your mum, did you start to enjoy school at that point?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was a good school. Kids were encouraged to do well. And I really enjoyed it. And I made a lot of great friends. Um, yeah, and it was kind of a blessing and a curse having my mum as the teacher there because there was a few of us that had parents who were teachers there. So we were given special permission. If something had to be got from the corner shop or anything like that, we were allowed to do it because our parents could give permission immediately.
Yeah.
But fortunately, which I think is really good, my mum never taught me. So by the time I joined, she was very early years. I'd skipped past her, so she didn't actually teach me. I don't think I would have enjoyed that at all.
I presume your mum was like, you deal with famous people all the time, famous at the school. What I mean? There
Well,
probably
she
wouldn't have
was
been-
very famous at the school because she was the only person of colour
Yes.
who was a teacher. It was a very small school, only one class per
Yeah.
year. And I think she was probably famous because she wore a sari to school every single day.
Every day.
Every single day.
That's incredible. I mean, that would be incredible now,
Yeah.
let alone back then.
Well, that probably just demonstrates how fearsome she is.
Yes, I'm getting that feeling coming through. I mean, that's quite a lot up because all the very bright colours, right?
Yeah, and it
you
looks
know,
amazing, and also it's quite a palaver to put on.
yeah,
And you have to wear a blouse and a petticoat, and you have to fold your sari, and it's not very. I can't imagine it's very child friendly if you're bending down or you're doing art, and there's a lot of material.
yeah,
And it's probably, yeah, exactly. It's probably not very user friendly in the workplace. Maybe I can put it that way, especially not when you're with kids. And I'm sure you're bending down all the time. And she was, she taught really tiny kids, but clearly it was important to her and part of her identity, and something that she may have given up on other things. She definitely did not give up on the way she looked.
and that would say to me that she was fiercely proud of who she was, where she
Yeah,
was from, and her culture. Did that have
definitely.
any impact on you?
Yeah, we were brought up in not a very traditional household, but without exception, like 90% of my parents' friends were Indian.
Yeah,
They very much had Indian culture at the heart of everything they did. They had a few. We had a few black friends, mostly from Jamaica, as it turns out. I don't know if that's got any significance. I'm sure it hasn't got any. Probably a reflection of the area.
yeah,
And that was their friendship group. So I think their need to keep the connection with home was really strong, because that was very important to them. And those were different times. They couldn't just jump on a plane and take us to India.
yeah,
And there were four of us. The thing that I remember really vividly, and I think this is true, and I'm sure it's not my imagination playing tricks on me, is that my parents worked so hard that we never had a family holiday. I don't ever remember a holiday with my mum and my dad.
yeah.
It was either my dad was working at home, or my dad and my mum was working at home.
And you had holidays. Did you go? I
Yeah,
mean,
we went
what
to
were your?
India. We went to India
Did that feel like a
every
holiday?
couple of years. No, it felt like I was being route marched around the relatives.
Correct.
But it was a holiday because everywhere you go, every family's house you go to, every friend's house you go to in India, you have to eat. So I would always come back at least 2 stone heavier because you would eat probably 15 meals a day. And we used to go in the school summer holidays because obviously my mum was a teacher. And that's probably the worst time to go to India.
Yeah,
Hot,
yeah,
monsoon.
yeah,
We would always fall ill. But there was something really comforting about, we would just rock up at, my parents didn't have a family house, but either my aunts or, and also in India, I'm sure it's the same in so many immigrant cultures, everyone's auntie. So I'm
yes.
sure none of these people were even related to
Oh, yeah, yeah,
me, but everyone was an auntie.
yeah. And they could have been. It's like when we go back to Nigeria, like everyone's an auntie and everyone's a cousin. I'm your cousin. You're like,
Yeah,
are you,
everyone's a cousin.
are you my cousin or are you
Well,
like,
my best friends are referred to by my kids as Auntie X and Auntie Y, and they're not even related to me,
yeah,
but they're called aunties.
yeah. It's someone actually referred to me as uncle the other day, just so who I was working with. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And
Yeah,
you're like,
not that old.
this is a bit random.
Yeah.
And then I worked out that I really was old enough to be his uncle. So it's like that. So traditional family, traditional upbringing. What did your parents want you to be? I'm pretty sure they didn't want you to be Angela Jain, world famous TV producer. I'm pretty sure that wasn't it.
Well, I'm pretty sure that's because they didn't know what that was.
Yes,
And
exactly,
neither did
yeah.
I. Well, look, I was quite musical as a child, so they really encouraged that.
All right.
So I did a lot of music at home. I think they wanted me to have a career. Not I think. They wanted me to have a career. Every one of my siblings has had a career.
When you
Uh,
say a career, do you mean something that they could explain easily to someone else?
yeah, something that they could brag about.
Yes.
Something that other people would understand,
Yeah.
and something that would actually make sense of the sacrifices they made
Yes.
in order to come to this country to give us all a better life.
Yes. That sounds like something you've heard before.
What do you mean?
That they might have told you that.
No. But obviously, I've thought about it, and I've been asked it a lot of times.
Right.
So I've thought about it a lot, and obviously they wanted for us something better than what they'd left behind. And when I think about it now through the prism of having my own children, I haven't even left South London. So the thought of moving twice with a young family, it's astonishing without any technology. They had no family here.
Right.
So they moved to a country with no family. And clearly it carried on in my family because then my oldest sister emigrated to America and never came back.
All right.
And one of my sisters spent a long time living in America and actually living in lots of different countries in the world.
Wow. That's yeah. I think the same. I think you're right for lots of people whose parents are immigrants. When you stop and think about it, you're like, I'm not sure I could have done that. You know?
I clearly couldn't and haven't done that. And maybe that is a reaction to them having done it. But I do, like so many things when you get older, your parents tell you to do this, that, the other, make sure you study, exams will be good for you, all of that. And of course, all you want to do is rebel. And actually, it's only in later life you go, oh, actually, that was quite useful parenting.
Yeah.
Or, oh, yeah, that was quite a good thing to say. But that's the act of rebellion in adolescence, isn't it?
So what did they tell you? I mean, did your parents tell you something that when you look back now, you're thankful for?
Well, there was an expectation that I would do well in my exams.
Mm-hmm.
There was an expectation I would go to university like all of my sisters before me. And then beyond that, they just, my mum worked in the same school for nearly 30 years. My dad worked in the same place. I think what they understood was stability in a career.
Mm-hmm.
So you would go somewhere and then that company would look after you and you would, through working hard and a meritocracy, rise through the ranks and hopefully end up doing a really good and important and valuable job. When I said, oh, actually, I'm an expert in television, I've watched so much television as a child, I've got an opinion on every single TV program I've watched, I want to make TV programs, much like me, who had no idea what they were talking about, they had no idea what I was talking about.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, what is that? And what does that mean? And then because the beginning of my career was entirely freelance, that really confused them.
Yes, it must
They
have
were like,
done.
so you're working for 6 weeks or you're not working? Or when's your next job? Oh, you don't know yet. Or you're working for 6 months? Or you pay tax in a different way? I mean, everything about it completely confused them.
Did they tell you, one of the things we debate on this podcast a lot is what advice your parents gave you about how you would have to live your life. And then how that's transpired to what you might tell your kids. So it's the classic, did your parents tell you you need to do better or work twice as hard because of the colour?
Yeah.
Did you get any of that sort of
Well,
advice?
I got the first bit before you said because of the colour of your skin.
Right.
They never said that was going to be a barrier. They always said to all of us, if you work hard, you will do well.
Right.
But you have to work hard. And they never, ever said to us, and the colour of your skin will hold you back.
Right. Because they didn't believe it, or they didn't
I
think you
think
needed
they
to know?
really wanted us to believe in ourselves.
Right.
And they didn't want us to see that as a disadvantage. And then, as it turns out, it becomes your superpower, doesn't it? Because when you recognise it for what it is, then you make a virtue of it. So they never told us that you can't do whatever you want to do because of the colour of your skin. Never. And my mum would have faced that every day. She was a teacher in the local community.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's a really important point that because and that advice stands for everyone, right? You know.
But they told us to dream big.
Yeah.
They were like, you can be whatever you want. And, I come from a traditional family where we were 4 girls. So the tradition in an Indian family, and not so much now, but definitely then, was that boys were prized over girls.
Mm-hmm.
So for my dad and my mum to say that about all 4 girls was, I think, probably quite revolutionary at the time.
Yeah.
There was an expectation we would get married, but there was absolutely an expectation we would have a career that would not be sacrificed in marriage.
Yeah. And you had the best role model of all, which
As
was
it turns out,
which
just
is your mum.
every day, my mum going to work. And I think it was so normal for us. I only understood later in life when I was, probably 8, 9, 10, that some people's mums stayed at home.
Yeah.
I thought everyone's mum was like my mum.
Yeah. And growing up, to be honest, growing up in South London, that really was the case.
Yeah.
Pretty much everyone
Yeah.
went to work all the
Yeah.
time, and you
Yeah.
had childminders,
So
or you went to nursery.
Exactly.
or
We
that
had a
was it.
succession of childminders. I mean, my poor sister, who's quite my older sister, who's quite a bit older than me, in between going to school, would have to pick me up from primary school, bring me home, feed me my lunch, and then take me back to school. Because the other thing that also marked us out, which was really significant, is I'm a Jain, so we were brought up vegetarian.
All right, okay.
And vegetarian, basically only hippies who'd been to India were
Yeah,
vegetarian,
back then, yeah.
and no one else was vegetarian. And so the school couldn't cope with me being vegetarian, so I would go home to have my lunch.
All
So
right.
all of that time, this is my first school, all of that time when you're in the playground making friends, I was marked out again as different
Yeah, because you weren't there.
because I
you-
wasn't there. And I was eating differently to
Yeah.
everybody. And everyone's like, what are you eating? And because the school didn't understand it, I had grated cheese and salad every day of my life. It was so gross. It was so gross. And there was no understanding. There was no adjustments made. There was nothing. There was just like, oh, you're a vegetarian. I don't know what that means. We won't even bother to help you.
Yeah, because actually, sometimes we focus on the color of people's skin, but actually that's just a portion of it, right? Because the culture and practices
Yeah.
that go with it can mark you out just as much, if not more.
Totally. So the colour of my skin and the fact that I'm a Jain makes me different again to a Sikh, for example,
Yeah,
or a Hindu. So yes, that just added another layer of complexity, I think.
yeah. And lastly on this, I'm kind of interested in when people grow up and they end up in the arts, and I know you're heavily involved in the arts generally. Was that always a passion, even through secondary school? Was
Yeah,
that,
so I
and
mean,
university?
yeah,
and,
absolutely. I loved reading. We were 3 doors away from a library, and I'm not lying when I say to you, throughout my whole primary years, probably almost until the age of about 13, I would read 3 books a week.
Wow.
I absolutely, and fiction. I absolutely loved reading. I absolutely loved going into different worlds. I absolutely loved imagining myself somewhere else. I used to have a piano teacher that was like a decent walk away, and I would go to her house. And my dad is super punctual. Oh my gosh, he cannot abide bad timekeeping.
Yeah.
And so that was drilled into us. And so I'd always be early. And then I decided to go early because she would have this, she was quite an elderly lady, and she would have a pile of books that I would go, I need to get there early because I need to get through the next chapter. And I need to get there early because I want to read 2 chapters. So I would get there early to be able to read. So I was always reading. I was marked out as someone who was musical.
Okay.
And so my primary school recognised that in me. So they were incredible. They told me that I should learn to play the cello, very unusual instrument. And then they thought I was good enough that my parents couldn't afford a cello, but the school effectively gave me a cello and said, you take that home and you practice and see where you get to. So I was interested in music, interested in the arts. I've always been interested in music. Yeah, so I think it was probably there. And as it turns out, my cousin, up until the time, and my real cousin, so not just a made up cousin, my cousin, up until recently when she became very ill, was a very famous singer
All right.
in India. No, let me qualify that, a famous singer in India. So maybe it was there. My mum was very engaged in the arts, but probably didn't really have an outlet. But she was so creative. She would make things from scratch. She was the first person in India to demonstrate a mechanical knitting machine.
All right. Okay.
So she would make her own clothes. She would knit her own stuff. She would make everything we had was made from, for example, when she taught my older son to read and write, she created a wheel from newspaper. She would recycle, reuse everything,
Right.
and created a wheel which had 80 or it in the middle and all the consonants around the edge. And that's how she taught him to read. And she just created the wheel out of one of those funny little, I don't even know what they're called, little drawing tap pin things. And then just create that. She was constantly creating stuff.
Wow.
So maybe without us even realizing it, it was just in the family. She would listen to music. Yeah. And I think I probably picked it up. And then I probably, obviously then, really ran with it because I loved reading.
Yeah.
Really loved reading. I loved English. If it had been up to me, I would have done arts A-levels. But all of my sisters in front of me were all scientists.
Yeah.
And so my dad and my mum just couldn't get their head around anything else. So I ended up doing subjects that genuinely I was not very good at.
Yeah.
Was kind of forced to do. And the only compromise was I was allowed to do geography, which was a writing subject, but felt like it could be a bit scientific. But yeah, I should have probably done languages, English, and a different combination.
Yeah.
But I
think
didn't.
I actually think, not to labour this point, but I think that's again another sort of being first generation children of people who've immigrated, because that's a proper thing. Like sciences are proper and
Yeah,
arts
and you
are
can sort of
not,
you can
know.
judge it and qualify it and
Yes.
value it, can't you, in a
Yeah.
different way?
You know, you do physics and chemistry, and but these are proper subjects.
Yeah, and that still exists, by the way.
I'm sure it does.
You know, arts and the creative industries and English. So if you look at A-level subjects, English, foreign languages are now deemed to be quite low status subjects. So because of the sort of handbrake turn into STEM, they have been devalued in some way.
Yeah.
Now, we all know when you get into the world of work, genuinely being able to write something, because you have to write all of the time, is quite a useful skill.
Yeah.
Being able to present something. So if you've done any form of performing, and I did quite a bit of performing, courtesy of my singing, I was in school operas and stuff like that. I did quite a bit of performing on stage, quite valuable,
Yeah.
as it turns out, whatever job you do.
Correct.
So yes, and also because I was the youngest, I think, and my sisters would say this, I was given a lot more freedom,
Yeah.
and I didn't have to conform, dare I say it, like my oldest sister had to, who really had the brunt of the responsibility of being the oldest. And I do recognise I didn't have that being the youngest.
Yeah, we're the opposite ends. I'm the eldest, torchbearer, everything by the book, you know. And
You should hang out with my older sisters.
Yeah.
You'll have a lot in
Yeah,
common.
we'll go like, that was terrible, and that was really, really hard, and you know, and the reality is, parenting, we're going to get into parenting, is tough. So the first one along is the one you're trying it out on.
Yeah.
You know.
And by the time she'd come to this country, this was the third country she'd lived in,
Yeah.
and she was 11 years old. And so she had a different set of challenges to the one I had, because I was born in this country.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's important to acknowledge all of that as well, isn't it?
Big up to your eldest sister.
Yeah, really, because actually she was left in loco parentis a bit because both my parents were working.
Yeah.
I mean, needless to say, she emigrated to America when she was 22 or 23 and never came back.
There you go.
She got as far away as possible.
This is what I think of that. Bye.
Bye-bye.
You'll never see me again. Then planes and the internet came, and it was all fine. Okay, so let's morph on from younger you into how you've ended up where you are. So we've touched on it. You know, freelancing. How did you get into what you're doing? What was your first proper job? How did you get it? And why? Because TV is such a difficult thing to.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, I sort of was there at the beginning of the internet-ish. So, you know, you weren't looking for jobs on the internet.
Yeah.
You were looking for jobs in, believe it or not, there was a section in The Guardian that advertised jobs, and there was a specific section on a Monday called Media Guardian.
I remember
where
it.
they advertised jobs in the media. Anyway, a long story short, I had a few twists and turns, you know, inevitably a lot of rejection. Nobody really wanted me. I had no experience to speak of. I had no contact. I had nothing. And to cut a long story short, my first proper job was at the BBC, where I was a researcher on a music programme called The Ozone. And that was an incredible experience for me. Part of a really small team. I was the full-time researcher. I can't even recall now if there was a full-time producer, but the guy who ran the department was amazing. And this has been a real theme of my career. He was like, get on with it. What's the worst that can happen? You'll either work or it won't work out. Just learn on the job.
Yeah.
Which actually was most incredible advice. And, you know, on a Monday, I arrived on the Monday. On a Wednesday, I had set up a shoot in Paris. And on the Friday, I was in the edit. I didn't even know what an edit was, with very experienced editors trying to cut the TV programme, which I didn't have the first clue what to do. But you just learn on the job, don't you?
Well, how did you get that then? If you talk about, let's go back a step. So you decide that this is a career you want to do.
Yeah.
Obviously, everyone must think you're partly mad because
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
and also they already doom you to failure. They say, well,
yeah,
you're not going to succeed anyway,
yeah,
because who do you know who does that job that can help you
yeah,
get that job? And anyway, what is that job?
yeah,
And I didn't even know myself. All I knew was, uh, I'm quite organised. I can think quite logically. I've got some stories I want to tell. I read a lot, and I've got an opinion on television programs. I've
yeah.
watched a lot of them. Surely that qualifies me to work in television. Surely that's all the
Well,
qualifications you
clearly it did
need.
though.
Um, yeah. So I suppose taking back a step, I can't genuinely. I can't even remember. I just know that I I got some holiday jobs at university, and one of the holiday jobs I got was I have always loved working.
Hmm.
So, and everyone in my family's worked, as you can hear. So, from the age of 16, I got my first Saturday job, and then I supplemented my Saturday job with, doing a bit of catering and being a bit of a waitress. And I mean, I really, really enjoyed the financial
Yeah,
independence. It was quite important to me, and that was probably very clearly drummed in by my parents as well. You need to be financially independent. So, I got a university job in the university holidays. I think I was typing a secretarial job, but it was at a company called Lorimar Telepictures,
hmm.
which then got bought out by Warner Brothers.
Oh,
But they made Dallas and Dynasty at the time.
oh wow.
I didn't have anything like an exciting job because, as it turned out, I was in the distribution part of the business, but I didn't realise that at the time. All I kept telling everybody was, I work for the people who make Dallas and Dynasty. I didn't really. I was basically a secretary in the corner typing stuff and looking at contracts. And I thought, oh, okay, this looks fun. And famous people every now and then would rock up, and it was in a beautiful location in a gorgeous Georgian townhouse in Mayfair. I was thinking, this is fun.
It's good.
And the guy who was on reception, who's still a friend of mine to this day, uh, ended up then going to work for a TV production company. And I said, oh, how did you get that job? I don't even know how he did get that job. I think he just met someone in a club or something. And I think they just, whatever.
Yeah,
I don't know. That's how these things happen. And so then I said, oh, that's what I want to do. Hello, can you help me? And he said, oh, well, why don't you come on a shoot and you can at least see what happens? And so it was one of those, and then another thing led to another thing. So I had all these tiny little itty bitty jobs that didn't really add up to anything. My first meaningful job was really at the BBC when someone said to me, you have got this job to do. You are a researcher. This program goes out every week. You are the person that will decide because it was a music show, what bands we will feature.
mm,
So I would speak to people who are called pluggers at
yeah,
record companies who would say, I want you to put this band on. I'm promoting this band. So it was a time of sort of take that. Take that and the other two and Blur,
yeah,
Oasis,
yeah,
that kind of time. So my job was to pick the band. And then because it was the Ozone, it wasn't a straightforward interview. You would do something with them. So I would either organise go-karting. So I'd have to be creative and think about, well, we're doing this interview with them. It's not going to be a straightforward interview like this. It will be an interview with actuality, because then you'll get a different kind of interview. That wasn't my idea, by the way, but that's how the Ozone was made.
yeah,
So then I would have to think about that. And I was the researcher, so I did all of it on my own. So I did everything from organising the shoot to writing the questions to doing the briefs, doing all the research. And then, as it turned out, I was given the opportunity to then sit in the edit suite and decide how the VTs, the inserts were cut,
yeah,
and the shape of the show. And it was an incredible experience. And whilst I was doing that, I said, oh, I'd like to be a portable single camera director, because I went out with directors who were doing
mm,
that. I said, oh, I'd like to be able to do that. And so they sent me on a course. I mean, it was incredible. They sent me on a course to be a PSC, is what it was called then, director. And at the end of it, after I think 18 or 20 months, my next job was directing a children's drama. I mean, it just sounds like make-believe now. I can't even believe I'm saying this as I say it. And it wasn't completely a children's drama, but it was a children's programme with quite significant drama inserts. And I think maybe if there is a theme, and I'm looking back and reflecting on my career now, which hopefully doesn't make this sound like this is my last job,
I'm sure it's not.
I think I didn't know what I didn't know.
Yeah,
So I just went in head first. Well, I didn't know, so I'm going to learn.
yeah,
And I think I've always had the right attitude. That has come back resoundingly in all the feedback. I've always got the attitude and and I always want to learn. I still take myself off to learn now. And I think that's partly because if I could analyze myself, I've always enjoyed learning. Learning, my mum was a teacher.
Yeah.
Learning was clearly in our family, and all of us are very, very highly educated. You know, there's a PhD in there, there's masters in there, there's all sorts of things in there. But I think I rejected that when I was younger. But probably in the end, learning on the job and learning subsequently was quite important to me.
It's, I mean, what you just said is super interesting to me, because obviously on this podcast we're talking to people who have achieved a lot being people of colour, and we've been I've been sort of decoding what ingredients are there, right? And you've kind of touched on three that I think are incredibly important. The first one is about resilience, which is you sort of saying, because I know we have a mutual friend, my brother Andy, and it's very easy in the early days of your career when you're doing something that no one really knows, for them to go, all right, you've had your time, give up on that. That was a nice thought that you were going to do this thing.
Genuinely, if there's anything people know about me, I am not a quitter.
Yeah.
So also, if I say I'm going to do something, I do it.
Yeah. So resilience is hugely important, because there's so many things that can knock your track, and everyone seems to have had that. And they've also had the other two things, which is this idea of proactive learning. I'm just going to go off and I'm just going to go and learn. I'm going to ask someone and they send me on a course. Or, you know, I had many people said, I just asked to go on this course and they sent me. I couldn't believe it. And then I learned that thing. So this sort of drive to learn and be proactive about learning. And this third thing, which now has a name, growth mindset, which is it's okay to not know.
Yeah.
At the start, it's okay to just think, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm probably going to be quite rubbish at it to start, but I'll learn, right?
Yeah.
And that Carol Dweck's work now is called growth mindset. And I think it actually marks out pretty succinctly people who achieve a lot from some people who don't.
Yeah. And I think the other themes that I pick on, given your questions, are also the sort of, you have to work twice as hard.
Mm-hmm.
I know how hard I work.
Yeah.
And I do. And I'm not saying that's just only unique to people of colour.
Yes.
But I think that is drummed into you from a very early age. The shorthand being, because you are of colour, you will have to work harder.
Yeah.
So I think you just do it as second nature. And I don't even think about it now, because I know the other thing I think that leads on to, which is probably a bit deeper, and more profound, is I think being underestimated is something that pushes you forward.
Yes.
So if you are underestimated, you walk into the room and everyone's already written you off, or everyone's already thought, well, you don't know how to do this, so you won't be able to learn how to do it. And you go, well, I'm going to show you.
Yeah.
I can do this. And so being underestimated when I walk into a room, I totally recognise that now. Sometimes if I'm in a particularly belligerent mood, I will call it out. And sometimes I go, that's fine. You go underestimate me. I roll me at your peril. Do not underestimate me.
Wow. That's some serious determination.
No, and also, you know, very early on in my career, I've never really done a lot of the sort of profile pieces where you get interviewed and people, you know, I don't know, in order to increase your profile.
Yeah.
But at one point in my career, and I think it's the only one I've ever done, actually, I did one of those pieces and they asked other people to characterise me. And this is stuck now because I've only got this one profile piece and people say it back to me all the time. And I was called an iron fist in a velvet glove.
Yeah. You and Margaret Thatcher, right?
That doesn't make me feel great. But I know what they mean by that.
Yeah.
And I do present something, and maybe that actually goes back to that sort of living two lives.
Yeah.
I present something in one context, and in another situation I can be slightly different. And I think there is a term for that, and I don't know if it's well known, but it's sort of code switching.
Yes, yeah.
So
we
you
talk
go
about code
in
switching
and
all the
out
time,
of
yeah.
rooms all of the time and are different with different people in different contexts. And being able to do that, guess what, is also a very helpful skill.
Yes. I think code switching is so interesting because most people of colour have to learn how to do it generally. But actually, that's because of the race thing. But clearly, lots of people do it.
Yeah.
You know,
well, and
for
also
different
let's not beat around the bush here. There is intersection here clearly
Correct.
between race and class.
Correct.
So class is that thing that's so actually peculiar to this country, but there's an approximation in India, which is caste.
Yes.
So actually, there is an intersection there, and we have to acknowledge that as well.
So if I so I'm going to say you're one of the most successful.
Okay, this is not fun, right? It's got really deep.
No, this is where we're
Can
going.
this get
right?
more fun?
No.
Oh, okay.
We're going there because I'm going to go to something which is around your success as a person of color in an industry that doesn't have lots of people of color in the sort of roles that you do, right? We'll talk about the issues of that later. So if you agree that that is true, what were the significant steps in you achieving that?
Well, a few things. I think when I started out, I was in a minority in a minority. So there were very, very few people. In fact, I can think of none that looked like me that were working in what was called entertainment.
Yes.
So everyone remembered me.
hmm Good or bad?
Well, hopefully a bit of both.
Yeah.
I don't want to just be remembered as someone boring and good. So I was totally memorable. And if you could see any Asian women at all, they were mostly in news and current affairs,
Yep.
in serious telly,
Yeah.
as opposed to entertainment telly. So I think that became an advantage. I think I was very lucky. I had some very significant sponsors in my career, people who recognised in me what I didn't even see in myself.
Okay.
So that started right at the beginning. Everyone from one of my first producers, Maddie Darrell, to Andy Peters, to Paul Smith. I think I've been extraordinarily lucky
hmm
in that, and I have to be really careful because everyone says you shouldn't call yourself lucky. We all know that. But anyway,
Yeah.
I will say it. Extraordinarily lucky that lots of people have seen in me the ability to move on and skills that I haven't quite recognised in myself, and that every time someone has given me the opportunity, I have, I think, not failed. I
Yeah.
have really risen to the challenge. I haven't always put myself there because I haven't always had the confidence to do that. But when people have given me that responsibility, I have taken it and run with it. So I've had lots of sponsors in my career: Andrew Newman, Kevin Ligo, Julian Bellamy. Actually, quite a lot of men, as it turns out. But
Yeah.
that's not unusual, is it?
No.
Because they were in the positions of power to be able to give me
Correct.
the opportunities. And there was nobody like me. So when I was reaching for the stars, I had to break one glass ceiling after another, because every time I got to the next step, there was like, oh, well, there is no Asian director who does that. There is no Asian producer, particularly in this area of television,
Yes.
not in the whole of television, but in this area of television. So I was like, okay. And then I got a job in commissioning, and I wasn't the only, but I was one of very few. And then I got the job as channel controller of E4, and then I was the first.
Yeah. You're now breaking new ground, right?
Yeah, so then with that comes a lot of responsibility,
Yeah.
by the way. And then that responsibility can be overwhelming at times because I can't speak for everybody. But when there are so few of you, the responsibility is all yours. And so actually having that diversity at the top, we don't need to bang the drum for it's good for business. That is well documented.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knows it's good for business. What we need to help figure out and help other people figure out is how to retain and promote those key staff that they believe have got the aptitude and the attitude to go all the way, even if they don't have it on their CV.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, thinking about you and your mindset, people often ask me, did you think about this or that when you were being promoted? And I didn't, right? I just thought, going back to what I was taught as a young kid, I just need to do my best. All I'm saying is I didn't feel I was carrying the weight of the whole of my race on my shoulders.
Yeah.
I can imagine you didn't think that either.
I
You
did
just
not
thought I
think
just need to
that
get out and do a good
until
job.
I became a channel controller.
Right.
And then I was so obviously the only person like that. I was like, wow, this has got a bit of responsibility now. And the decisions I make, which I'd been making, because that's the whole point about diversity, isn't it? I'd been making those decisions all the time. So when I directed a show for Channel 4 called Moving People, it was actually a lovely show. And it was about, because, what is it? Getting divorced, moving house. What's the other thing? The 3 most stressful times in your
Getting
life?
married.
I'm not sure it's getting married. Anyway, whatever it
Yeah,
is, but moving house apparently is
yeah,
one of the most
yeah, yeah.
stressful things in
Moving
your
house
life.
is
And
definitely
so clearly someone thought, oh, wow, that's a great starting point for a
yeah.
TV show. So what it was 3 films per show about different people's experiences of moving house.
Nice show.
Um, I really enjoyed it. And one of the stories that I wanted to tell was about somebody who came to West London as part of the Windrush generation, lived in Portobello.
Hmm.
Um, she was Indian, Jamaican Indian. Her husband was black Jamaican, sorry. Her husband had died. They had taken his body back to Jamaica. And her story of moving house was she was going back home to Jamaica to be with him.
Right.
And I wanted to tell that story.
Yeah, yeah,
And I was like, well, of course I want to tell that story. And I've got no relationship to Jamaica, by the way,
yeah,
or anything like that. And as it happened, she was Indian, but her husband was black. And but I just wanted to tell that story. So I'd been making those decisions all of the time about stories I wanted to tell without, I think, because when I did get jobs, for example, I would be called up for jobs. Oh, you're Asian. We're doing a documentary about forced marriages.
Hmm.
And I literally rejected all of those things that were so on the nose. Every time I got one of those calls, I said, I'm not doing that. I always felt my job was to bring diversity centre stage into homes and mobiles and lives of people that felt much more everyday.
yeah, yeah,
I felt that that was my job.
yeah. And you didn't want to have the token jobs.
I didn't want to just talk about forced marriages. I didn't want to just talk about things that so obviously look Asian
Yeah.
because they don't completely define me.
No. What defines us? So what you're saying is race has had a really interesting role to play in your career, both positive and negative.
Yeah, and in telling stories and people trusting me to tell their stories, because you're asking contributors and they're trusting you to tell their stories, but that also I was doing that because that just felt normal.
Yeah.
And it didn't appear that anyone was particularly stopping me from when I said, "Oh, I want to tell this story." I also told a story about which is maybe is another theme in my life about a bunch of young hopeless boys moving house who just literally were useless because they just made me laugh.
Yeah.
They were incredible characters. They were leaving. Obviously, it was the first flat they'd ever moved into, and then they're moving to. And I just loved telling the story of sort of slightly hopeless, hapless teenage boys, which, you know, no coincidence. Then I commissioned The In-Betweeners.
Yes.
So as it turns out, there are themes in my career, and they're not all to do with race and colour, but there is an element of it that's absolutely defined by who I am and where I came from.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. So so that makes sense. And if we move forward then to the issue of race, more on the nose, as you put it, to what degree do you think racism or prejudice exists in the world that you work in? And if it does, how do we fix it?
Well, if we all had the answers to that question,
I know.
we wouldn't be asking the question.
What do you think we could do to make a difference?
So I think racism exists everywhere.
Hmm.
I think you don't have to be white to be racist.
Absolutely not.
It's not the preserve of white people. I think, what do we do to fix it? I think everyone plays a part.
Mhm.
Every single decision you make, every single way you pay it forward, every single time you open that door a little bit more and you do not pull up the ladder behind you,
Mhm.
you are helping one person. And if you change that person's life, I know that from and I know I talk about my mum a lot, and that's maybe because she's not here. So I sort of, now my memory of her is an aspic in a way.
Yes.
But I know she changed people's lives.
Mm.
I know people became teachers as a result of seeing her being a teacher. That's very straightforward role modelling, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
But equally, there are just those conversations you have with people where you say, yes, it's hard. Yes, your colour will hold you back. Yes, racism is a part of it. Yes, you have to be resilient. There's no avoiding it. You are going to have to work twice as hard. I'm sorry. And if you're not up for that, then this probably isn't the business for you. But actually, if you really are up for it, you will get there and you can get there, but it is not going to be easy. So and I'm, as you would expect, given the scarcity of people like me in my business,
Yeah.
asked to talk about this a lot. And all I try and do is mentor, sponsor people in a way that is meaningful, that will change the course of their careers. So I don't spread myself too thinly. I don't pretend I have all of the answers. My experience is unique to me, and it's going to be different for different people. And obviously, my experience is dated now; it's historical, and the world has changed. And I think there are simultaneously more opportunities, and we're going backwards at the same time, as it turns out.
What do you mean by that?
Well, as in, I think we're having this conversation,
Right. Okay.
right? Number one, I can talk about, and maybe that's a position of privilege given the position of power I'm in,
Hmm.
but I can call things out all the time. And also, that's the benefit of getting older. I really don't mind. It's my
Yeah.
responsibility now. I
Absolutely.
am not going to keep quiet. Um, and I hope that doesn't mark me out as a troublemaker, because I think that's the other thing that I was very conscious of when I was coming up through the ranks,
Hmm.
particularly when I was freelance, is that you're only as good as your last job. And if you keep rocking the boat a lot, then you get marked out as a troublemaker.
Yeah.
And guess what? People don't want to work with you. So I probably kept more quiet then, and I was more junior, and have kept less quiet now, and am more vocal. But equally, part of being in the world of work is you can't win every single battle.
No.
So you have to be really clear about what battles you want to win. And I know, because I've just experienced one of those very recently, I find it very easy to galvanize people and champion what I believe to be the underdog.
Yeah.
I think it's so innate within me. And I'm not sure I don't know where that's come from. I genuinely don't know where that's come from. But I've got a very strong moral compass. And if I don't think something is fair, it's probably the thing that upsets me the most.
Yeah.
And so some sense of fairness and fair play and voices being heard means I'm often like, right, okay, everyone, we've got to galvanise, we're going to change this, and we're going to come together and we're going to do it. Because I know that on my own, I can't change everything. But guess what? If you galvanise other people and there's an overwhelming response to something, you can actually change things.
No.
You can.
Yeah.
And I've proven that time and time again.
Yeah. Every single person can make a difference. You've
Yeah,
got to believe that.
and you've got to believe that, because also you know that, because once you've actually made a difference to one person's life and they tell you about it, it's genuinely one of the most rewarding things to hear.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
No.
just actually touches your heart in a way that is so profound. Like, oh my gosh. Or even, and it might not even be, it doesn't have to be that you've helped them get a job. What you've helped them do is believe in themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
What you've recognised as them is, this is me paying it forward, is what other people recognised in me, which I didn't have the confidence to recognise in myself.
I know. I could definitely see it. But if you think about that, then, we're privileged to have you here today with the position you're in. And TV and media is such an important thing in influencing the way people are. I have to ask you this question about, we know there's a lack of diversity behind the camera, and it appears that there is more diversity in front of the camera. What element of that is performative, right? So, there are lots of people say, well, it's like when you make an advert now, it's really impossible just to have a white family in an advert now. You have to either have a mixed race family or an ethnic diverse, well, we can't put that anymore. But some element of that is performative, because really that means now, if you look at the representation in adverts, it doesn't reflect the actual population of the country. So I'm really interested in your views of performative actions and lack of diversity behind the camera.
Well, there's a lot of answers to that question. I think you sort of answered it yourself by saying, because it lags behind camera, then clearly an element of what you see is performative.
Yeah.
Now, I wouldn't want that to be reduced, because some people say to me, oh, look, there's an overcorrection now. Look how many non-white faces we see on television. I'm like, wowzers, is this the world we're in? Surely not. So I wouldn't want to change that at the expense of allowing off-screen talent, as we call it in television, to get on. I think there is better representation off-screen. It is clearly in no way good enough. And there are clearly sectors of people, if we really want to get into granular, that are doing better than others. So black men, I don't see that much of. Pakistani Muslims, don't see that much of. Bangladeshi Muslims, don't see that much of. Indians see more of. And so there are, even within that,
Yeah.
subsections which probably inevitably reflects society where those people are getting on. So how do we correct it? Well, I think there's lots. We all play a part, I think, is my very straightforward answer to that.
Yeah.
Every single person plays a part, and challenging people to think differently. I have a very specific example, which I won't go into the detail, of a very specific example of something I did post the murder of George Floyd, where I challenged somebody to think differently. And it actually really moves me because this person was much older, and they said that my challenge changed the course of their life. And they are paying forward and doing so much, and they're not black, by the way, or even of a minority, to help people of colour. And he has said publicly, because of the challenge I gave him. So that challenge that I gave him
Yeah.
has changed him.
Yeah.
And because that's changed him, he's changing other people's lives because he's in a huge position of power. And so I could have not said anything.
Yeah.
But I felt I had to say something.
I agree. I mean, the role
So it's not just about black people
Yes,
and role modelling for me, role modelling for Asian people.
Yeah.
It's actually about bringing everyone with you.
Yes, 100%. The role of allyship in this journey to greater racial equity is huge. It's huge. It won't be just changed by people of colour. Of course it won't.
No.
It'll be actually changed by the majority, by white people. But the level of allyship is there, and the passion is there. And sometimes when you spark that awareness, people don't find something in themselves they don't even know was there.
Yeah, which goes back to what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Hey?
You know,
you've ignited in something, or it's been thought-provoking, and that's what challenges should be, which then make you think, I want to change the way I behave.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you one more specifically around your position and TV, and that's around stereotyping. You've got this hugely powerful position in some, especially the non-scripted output that goes along. I did my last role, I did a little podcast with some young black girls, and one of their issues was the stereotyping of young. So they said, we have an issue anyway, and that the media and TV stereotypes what we are like. And I've seen that in reality TV shows. I've seen that in scripted TV shows. I'm wondering given your position, what your perception of this is.
Well, I've probably got a broader perception because I watch a lot of television. There is definitely not enough in terms of a variety of representation, which is why people will then pick out certain representation and say that feels unfair. What we have to strive to is a variety. So you can have Michaela Cole making an incredible piece of drama, and you can have Daniel Lawrence Taylor making Time Wasters, about a bunch of black kids who step back in time to Edwardian England, and they're a jazz band.
Yeah.
It's about a variety of stories, isn't it? And if there isn't enough variety, then the stereotypes are more prevalent and more noticeable, aren't they?
Yeah.
So that's why every time I make a decision, I'm just trying to chip away at those stereotypes. And we can't, and it will be piece by piece. And I'm very sympathetic to people saying there's not enough variety, because I agree. But actually, we are in a better place than we were, but it's still not good enough. And so I go back to everybody who makes a decision needs to play their part. And that's why you need diverse voices, and that cuts across class and colour in positions of power, because then you will get true equality. Because at the moment, the gatekeepers all kind of look and sound the same a bit.
Oh.
And you could accuse me of that. I probably sound a bit like that. I didn't sound like this when I was growing up. I've learnt to sound like this.
Right.
Because this has been my way of getting on and fitting in.
Which we talked about earlier, right? And that's a really important thing. And you think things like, let's say Bridgerton, which kind of messes with historical fact a little bit,
Yeah.
is a positive?
I'm not going to pick out individual things.
Okay,
I
fair
say
enough.
I think what I'm trying to say is you just need a variety of all of
Yeah,
these things, don't you?
yeah,
It's like, I don't know, when you go to the theatre, and I go to the theatre a lot, you can go and see something in the National where Adrian Lester is doing Shakespeare, and then I can go and see, which I saw a few weeks ago, for Black Men Considering Suicide, and the cast is all 6 black men on stage.
yeah,
You want that variety, don't you?
yeah.
So that it doesn't feel like only white people can play Shakespearean characters and only black people can play black characters. After all, by the way, to say something very unedifying, the whole point of acting is you're playing a part.
Correct.
So, you know, that should therefore make it more open and more inclusive
Yeah,
in a way.
yeah. There shouldn't be so many barriers, and some of the things that happened recently.
And actually, I think theatre is, particularly British theatre, is an amazing template for television to look at.
Yeah.
I really, really do. I think the things I see, and I do go to the theatre a bit, on British stage, just black people not even playing black people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which is amazing, right?
And black people playing black people, like 4 black men considering suicide. And I you know, at the Donmar, at the National, it's incredible. It's incredible. It's life enhancing, and it's amazing because then guess what? They bring a different audience to the theatre. All of those things that are really positive. I mean, I'm not really an opera buff, but I know somebody that used to run the ENO, and he was not a person of colour, but he was very, very, very instrumental in trying to make that organisation and the people on stage more diverse.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
Very influential.
yeah, and we come back to the allyship and what's important with that. So 2 questions to close. Positive. First is you've broken glass ceilings. What advice do you give to people who feel like they're approaching or they're at a glass ceiling?
I think that allyship. God, that's quite hard to say,
It
isn't it?
is. It is. I've had a lot of practice.
Allyship piece is important. I think it took me a while to understand that in the workplace, if you want to get on, you need to make friends with people. And that doesn't just mean your boss. You don't just have to manage up, but you need to have allies in your peer group. So I would say it took me a while to work that out. And that is very, very valuable. And if you're approaching a glass ceiling, just need to go head first into it and headbutt it and just get on with it. Because honestly, the reward is huge. The responsibility is huge. But what you will do for the next generation is so valuable. But when I was thinking about this on the way here, I was thinking, oh, why could I never see people like me on television? I didn't ever. And then the first time I did was Goodness Gracious Me, at which point I was an adult. I was like, wow, this has taken forever. Now when I think about what Meera Syal, Sanjeev Bhaskar and all of those people did, they literally made sense of the Kling film on my remote control at home. I was like, oh, everyone does that. That's amazing. Well, not everyone.
Yes.
Just Asians do that. And they made sense of my life. And they made it funny.
Yes.
They didn't say, oh, woe is you, you're going to have an arranged marriage, this is going to be awful. And I'm not in any way denigrating those situations to people to whom that's happened.
Yeah.
But they made fun of all of our idiosyncrasies. And now when I think about that, Goodness Gracious Me started as a radio show on Radio 4. Talk about breaking glass ceilings and doing things that were unheard of. It just blows my mind now that they did that.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
It's incredible, and it means a lot to everyone, not just, because awareness is the cornerstone of, I think, of the battle, which is awareness, right? Goodness Gracious Me did what Desmond's had done before it for black people, like a barbershop.
Yeah.
Now, every black male and female understands the barbershop culture, but no one else did until Desmond came along and was just like a torchbearer for that sort of situation comedy, where people just didn't know that this sort of thing existed, apart from a small group of people who did.
Yeah, and I think I've probably used my career to sort of tell those stories sort of by stealth in a way, rather than up front and centre. I've just wanted to put them in the mainstream.
Yeah, yeah.
And actually, Goodness Gracious Me has subconsciously really impacted me. I fangirled Meera Syal recently, so that's how embarrassing I am. Just because I had to say that to her. I was in the same room as her, and I just had to say that to her. I just had to say, I just thought it was so incredible what you did.
Hopefully she said what you're doing is incredible too, because it is.
Yeah. But also, it's not about that, is it? It's just about sometimes going, I just loved what you did.
Yeah.
It was amazing, and it had a very profound impact on me. And I don't want you to then, overanalyze that. It was just incredible, and thank you for making us heard and seen.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. So last question, as I ask everybody, which is, we've covered a hell of a lot of ground, some of it pretty deep.
Yeah, I know. The fun me hasn't come out at all.
No,
anybody who knows me, my trademark is my laugh, and I've not laughed once.
I know that
So
makes
what
me
happened
feel
there?
bad. That makes me feel bad because I've not said anything.
There you go. I've given you a laugh.
Nothing that's particularly funny. So, okay, why should we be hopeful, Angela? Why should we be hopeful?
Because a world without hope is a world not worth living in.
Yes.
You've got to be hopeful. I look at my own kids. You've got to be hopeful. You've got to believe. We, I think, are of a generation where we probably have benefited enormously from things that were handed to us. And actually, when I think about my own children, they are facing a world at the moment. They've already, in their short lives, gone through COVID. There are 2 wars going on at the moment.
Yeah.
And when I was a student and studying geography, I never forget this. Malthus said that population will be stopped by war, pestilence, and famine. We're in that age.
Yep.
And we were talking about historical times then. So, and they are much more engaged in climate change.
Yep.
We have been singularly useless, I think, as a generation.
100%.
So I feel much more hopeful. And because of what I do, I work with a lot of young people because it is quite a young business. So, I'm constantly talking to 20-somethings. They're really clever. They're much cleverer than lots of us. They really want to change the world. They want to make a difference. They're very proud of who they are and where they've come from. And what we need to do is just give them the space to be able to tell their stories.
Yeah, I agree. I think young people, not to put the burden of hope just on their shoulders, but from what I can see, what you can see, they think, act differently. They care about the world, what it's like, what it will be for the future, where we and our generation maybe probably should have done a bit more of that. And that does also fill me with genuine belief that they can make a huge difference, supported by the generations above them, who are still the decision makers
as we
now.
have been from the generations above, in front of us. Everyone from Samir Shah to Sanjay Singhal to Trevor Phillips to Farouk Dondi. I mean, there's been people before me, not many women as it turns out, but people before me of colour. So we all stand on the shoulders of other people, don't we? And what we just got to do is not create a pyramid so it just gets smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
What's the inverse of a pyramid? I can't think of
An
what it
inverse
is.
pyramid.
An upside down pyramid, is so that we give more and more opportunities to these people. And as we know, particularly in this country, the mixed race minority, if that's even the right way to talk about it, are only growing.
Yeah.
So that's really fascinating and interesting for me. There are going to be people who don't only come from one place or the other. They're going to come from multiple places. What do they have to say about the world? What's their experience? I think that's really fascinating because that group is only growing and growing.
Yeah, the fastest growing race in the country is mixed race.
So that's really interesting because mixed race is obviously such an enormous umbrella term for so many different places you could have come from.
Yeah, and there's a lot of positivity goes with that the world has already changed.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. And I've got to feel full of hope. I'm closer to the exit, as they say, than the entrance.
Yes.
But however, that doesn't mean that I don't feel like every day I can have one conversation. I've got 2 of those tomorrow with individual people where I'm going to remind them they're really good at what they do.
Yeah. Well, look, thank you very much. It's been. Apologies for not enough laughs.
Not enough laughs. Anyone who knows me is going to go, "Wow,
that
never
was
heard
a
her
bit deep.
speak like that."
That was a bit deep. I mean, what was going on there? Seriously, what happened? So, apologies, not enough laughs. I will try harder. But you've been, literally, you are a legend. You've been a legend on this show. It's been incredible having you on. I really appreciate the honesty with which you've answered those questions. I know it can be difficult given your position, but your honesty hopefully comes across loud and clear. So, Angela, thank you for being on. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to you doing more to change the world because I know you're going to.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for doing this, because this is also part of encouraging and believing in people of colour and their ability to go all the way.
Yeah, we're making a change little by little.
That's all it's about.
Little by little.
Little by little.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.